is the loans to the households and businesses. And how dare the banks and their boards? Admittedly, the personalities have changed since 2001, even since 2008. But we need accountability. Let's get them gathered together in a place that will accommodate such a revelation, the Basketball Centre in Dublin, and in sections, alphabetically, bank, institution, starting with the A's, AIB, Anglo-Irish, Bank of Ireland, and so on, down Danske, Ulster, and so on. And have the boards of directors, the people who were there in charge of directing the bank, explain their balance sheets in the 2001, 2002, 2003, and just observe. They were going out of control. When the music stopped in 2008, Bank of Ireland had funding on its balance sheet of 61 billion euro funding loans. And that funding, senior secured bonds, was short-dated compared to some of the loans that were extended on a rollover basis, interest only. Crazy stuff. Dynamite. Matches and petrol come to mind. It was going to, it's not even the fault of a previous government. That's the boards of directors. They created the credit bubble. You can't have an asset price boom and bust without credit creation. All the customers' deposits were lent out. Not alone was that good enough for the directors, they wanted more funds to make more loans, so they issued bonds. As I said, Bank of Ireland 61 billion, AIB 42 billion in 2008. In addition to all the customers' loans they lent out, and in addition to all the interbank money that they'd borrowed short on 3 and 6 and 12-month rollovers. Mad. There's your banking inquiry. Let's have those directors of those institutions in those years in and look at their accounts for that period and explain them. The 1.5 million people that I just talked about, the souls of the 385,000 on the live register, the 170,000 in deep mortgage distress, that's 500,000 souls because there's 2.7 people in each household. The 90,000 on the housing waiting lists, who are the people who, were squeezed out of the madness of the credit asset price boom and bust bubble. And the 5,000 who have no homes to go to at all and are sleeping in the streets. 1.5 million people. They deserve to see the curtains rolled back out at the Basketball Centre and have the explanations. I'm not saying there should be firing squads at dawn, decapitations, heads on battlements. No, but just let's hear what they've to say. Not one person on those boards has been asked to explain their balance sheets, which is the evidence of the creation of the credit bubble. Isn't it crazy? And isn't it crazy that the government want a committee of inquiry that's going to be politically balanced so that there's a government control of it? And there are people who may feel at this moment, until they start boning up completely at sea, as to where to begin. But I've just told you where to begin. That would be the best lesson in how to avoid anything in the future. Because you know what? Without the credit bubble, everything else couldn't have happened. Couldn't have happened. When you create credit like that, and only the banks did it, you create the conditions and the climate for greed. And I hear when I read and open the papers, greedy builders and developers, no. They couldn't have been greedy unless the greed ingredient, which is credit, had been created by the banks. Am I right, Deputy Ross?
Sorry, I missed your last sentence.
Yeah. Well, I just thought that maybe because there's the Minister and 2 colleagues here, and, oh, you're very welcome, Deputy Coppinger. I'm talking, might as well be talking in the garden at home. But I hope it's recorded. Maybe the Minister would ask his colleagues in the government benches to have a look into this, because it could save a lot of money to start the banking inquiry along the lines I've just said. And let's save some money for the taxpayer, and let's share with the taxpayer the true and the truthful and fair and even-handed opening scene, pull back the curtains, and let's start from there. Because, the guarantee, that's only when the boil bursts. And we all know what happened after that. We all know that the lawyers had us all shivering and afraid to do what was right, instead of which they became neurotic about the law and said, historical law says that everybody should be protected equally, including the guys who had bought in the secondary market the bonds that were originally offered in the primary market to the investors, and the investors had the good sense to get out and sell it to the secondary market and that's when the bonds go up and down in prices. And we had this morning in PAC NAMA in to explain how they hope to actually reduce the exposure of the exchequer, that's us, the citizens, by accelerating the disposal of the loans portfolios they have. And actually, they're probably right to do that at the moment, because there is a huge amount of overloaded liquidity in the hedge funds' hands and in other investment funds' hands, looking to buy assets at lower yields than they otherwise might. And they're there because the cost of the bonds that NAMA issued to the banks in return for the rotten loans they got at the time, at the moment, currently, that cost of holding those bonds or having them out there is low. But if they hold on to the funding of the bonds and hold on to the assets because somebody thinks they might make a bit more, the price of those bonds, it's a floating variable rate, might rise. And then there could be losses. Because as the yield on those bonds, supported by the underlying property assets, as those yields rise, the value falls and the underlying assets falls. So maybe they're right. And I personally would think they are right to see, can they get larger lumps of those portfolios over, just to reduce the exposure of the state, of the people. That's us. But anyway, I wish you well. If wherever you can, simplify things. Don't add more law that people, their heads get wrecked and melt when they're trying to understand what's going on. Simplify. And do get people who are competent and experienced and as apolitical as possible to work these things. And not to be afraid of any bad news that might be coming down. Face it, measure it, and then you can deal with it. And keep it open and transparent. That's all I have to say. But don't, Minister, please allow any of your colleagues to do what has been done on a few occasions. It wasn't in your watch when NAMA bill was brought forward in September and October, November of 2009. But the IBRC liquidation and the prom thing, that was actually presented, in my view, dishonestly, misleadingly and dishonestly. And a golden opportunity to get the cancellation of what is now the prom bonds and was the promissory notes achieved. And that could have been done. I'm deeply, deeply disappointed on behalf of the people who elected me into this House and the people who elected everyone else in here that happened. And that, illusory and misleading language packaged something other than what it is at the time. It's not right. So, honesty is the best policy. Thank you.